Transformers Dark of the Moon was directed by Michael Bay and is the last live-action movie I had left to cover on the channel. I've talked about all the other ones from the first Transformers to Rise of the Beasts last year. I have one more movie left before Transformers 1, that is The Transformers the movie. We'll get to that one very, very soon, but wrapping up the Bay movies over here, we're gonna end with what many consider to be the best one, at least now, and talk about some fun stuff around it. I say now because at the time Dark of the Moon came out, the reviews weren't exactly glowing. But in the time since Dark of the Moon has come out, I feel like this is one of those movies that just kind of grows on you in some ways. Dark of the Moon also did come out at a point when things were a little shaky when it came to the Transformers. People really enjoyed the first movie, but Revenge of the Fallen kind of just fell on its face. A lot of people were not happy with it, especially not a lot of Transformers fans. It even ended up winning the Razzie for Worst Picture, which was pretty crazy. So going into Dark of the Moon, there was a lot of uphill battles ahead for it, and there were a lot of things that had to be done in order to restore, the faith in it. Like, hey guys, there's something great that can still come out of this. And so in a lot of ways, Dark of the Moon plays like both an apology letter for Revenge of the Fallen, which even Michael Bay very publicly denounced, calling it crap, and it also plays out as a big series ender for the trilogy at the time. Because at the time, we didn't know there was going to be a Transformers Age of Extinction or The Last Knight. At that time, this was pitched as the final movie. Every single thing that happens in it is so elevated to a point, especially that final hour in Chicago, that it really does feel like it's a wrap-up session. Now, at the time the movie came out, I was actually moving house. We were in the middle of a lot of changes, things were happening very, very quickly, and one of those things was I could not go see this in theaters. I was very excited to see it, and I really wanted to go see it, but it's not like right now where it's like, theaters are, walking distance from me. Unfortunately, I had to miss this one. I didn't see a lot of movies in 2011 in theaters, actually. In fact, a lot of them I ended up watching at home on, DVD, Blu-ray, digital HD download kind of stuff. Even Captain America: The First Avenger was one of those movies. But I remember watching Dark of the Moon, and I've seen the movie so many times since, it's kind of crazy. And it's one of those things where, you think about movies that mean a lot to you in a lot of ways, and that's one of them. And I think I say that for just about the entire Transformers series. I feel like some of these movies really did come out at times when, you really needed them. When it comes to Revenge of the Fallen, even though I don't think that's a good movie, I was not having a great year. 2009, not my finest hour. I wasn't a big fan of it. And when that movie dropped, it was kind of the one good thing. And Dark of the Moon was kind of the same. It was like this movie I watched again and again in a school year that I wasn't very, I wasn't very happy with, having a hard time with a bunch of stuff, especially when it came to, studies and just people in class, some idiot, people and all that. But if they're watching, sorry. But, at the end of the day, Dark of the Moon kind of got me through that. It was a fun one. That and Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, those were like two beacons for me during that summer. And I really like Dark of the Moon. In fact, in a lot of ways, I kind of love Dark of the Moon. Does it have issues? Yeah, there are things that I think are not that great. I think there's a lot of human elements especially that don't really work for me. I'll get more into some of that later. But when it comes to just being the spectacle movie, like when it has to just be a big action movie, it's really, really great. That entire final hour is sublime stuff. It is truly some phenomenal blockbuster filmmaking. It all looks and sounds and feels incredibly epic, and the movie is extraordinary when it gets to that part of it. But leading up to that first hour, like I said, feels like an apology for Revenge of the Fallen. There's a lot of emphasis on trying to tell a much more cohesive story, something that really manages to tie in a lot of elements together, and some of it is actually genuinely quite fascinating. Like the whole storyline involving the conspiracy theory of the moon landing. It's like, hey, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed, and then there was a blackout period for about 21 minutes where no one knows what happened. And it was because it was an undercover mission to find out what was on the Ark, a crashed Cybertronian ship that escaped during the war and had some technology on it that could really help change things. Eventually, that's found out to be these pillars that are being guarded by Sentinel Prime. And I loved that entire storyline because eventually Sentinel Prime is the big villain of this movie. Megatron is in hiding because he's been very gravely wounded by Optimus in the last movie. He had half his face blown off, and that entire fight happened, and his arm cut off, I believe. The Decepticons are making their moves in the shadows to make this massive comeback, leading to this big invasion, raising an army that's on the moon waiting to strike. And there's the other thing with Sam trying to get a job after college, and with a new girlfriend, Carly, played by Rosie Huntington-Whiteley. Now, that's something that got a lot of eyebrows because, you know, Megan Fox was so ingrained in the DNA of the franchise, but then due to a lot of stuff that happened behind the scenes, she wasn't in the third movie. It is a little funny because you remember Revenge of the Fallen's big ending involved this big confession of love that Sam and Michaela had for each other. So the moment being like, you know, hey, it kind of brought him back to life, you know, over there, and there was this big I love you thing. And then the third movie being like, oh, they kind of broke up in the middle. Here's a new girlfriend now. It's like, huh. Okay, I guess so. But yeah, I thought they were fine in the movie. They weren't too bad. Eventually, there's a whole angle with another guy, Dylan Gould, played by Patrick Dempsey. He turns out to be the human villain of the movie, a human confidant with the Decepticons, and they have their own thing to cover up everything that's going on the moon. But then Dylan's motivation for the rest of the movie is very vague. It's not that great. Like more like it just, I don't really care much for it. Then there's Sam's work where he's working for this guy Bruce, played by John Malkovich, who had a very fun time doing this. You can clearly tell. One of the co-workers over there is involved in this conspiracy, Jerry, played by Ken Jeong. This whole scene where he straddles Sam in the bathroom stall, like, hey, this conspiracy theory is there, you need to help your friend. And then eventually him getting killed by Laserbeak to wipe out all loose ends. This new director, Meering, played by Frances McDormand, who is also trying to have a good time with what she's working with. But once we're clear of all that, and then the big Decepticon invasion starts and you get to Chicago, it leads to some of the best action of the franchise. The wingsuit scene when Lennox and his team land into Chicago from the air, that whole sequence is absolutely phenomenal. The whole fight sequence that eventually happens with, you know, the Autobots and Decepticons towards the end, all of the humans and Autobots working together, this big grand finale, and of course the standout sequence, which is this building sequence where Sam, Epps, and Carly and everyone who was on that team are trapped in there as they're trying to escape Decepticons. I remember I was at this New Year's Eve party. My dad was in Singapore at the time. He was like, you guys should come here for New Year's. We're like, all right. And at that party, someone my dad was working with brought her partner, who was a visual effects artist at Industrial Light and Magic at the time, and he had worked on Dark of the Moon. And God bless that guy, because my God, he took every single question I had about that movie and answered all of it. And it was an awesome conversation. And I remember I asked him about this scene. And I was just like, hey, did you work on this? He was like, yeah, I was working, bits and stuff all over the place because, there's so many VFX artists. Sometimes you have to do the small stuff. But we had to completely revamp our entire operating system. Everything had to be upgraded because the systems that we had at the time couldn't take that scene. And of course, the final sequence that you get is jaw-dropping. It's so great. It is truly a fantastic, about 15 minutes of movie. Really, really great stuff. And Shockwave watching from below as well. I wish there was a little bit more of Shockwave in the movie, but it was really cool seeing him in the movie, like from the Chernobyl sequence early on till the very end of it. Optimus's big I am done with this shit moment. He flies in with his jetpack trailer thing and just slides through a bunch of Decepticons, slicing and dicing them. Incredible moment. I loved it so much. That was one of the best things like I had ever seen at that time. It was such a great moment, eventually leading up to Shockwave and then killing him as well, and then the big fight that happens with Sentinel Prime. Now, I haven't talked about Sentinel Prime so much in this video yet, so I guess I should. He's great. He's set up very early on, because let's pretend you didn't know who the voice actor was. Early on in the movie, Wheelie and Brains are in Sam's house. They're like Carly's place. They're watching Star Trek, and Wheelie remarks,
"Ah, shit, I seen this one. It's the one where Spock goes nuts."
and unless you knew that Leonard Nimoy was playing Sentinel Prime before you watched the movie, that's a really cool Easter egg, because that's exactly what happens. Sentinel Prime goes nuts, joins the bad side of things, kills Ironhide in the process, and he's bossing Megatron around, who is already in a pretty weak state. You know, he's this rusted up truck. So yeah, it's really, really well done, and then eventually the big fight that commences between them is really great too. And I love Leonard Nimoy in this movie. He was awesome as Sentinel. I love that entire fight that happens eventually with him and Optimus. Megatron getting involved and saving Optimus right before he gets killed, because Carly is like, hey, why don't you do something about this? Because up until now, Sentinel is treating you like a little bitch. So, and that's enough for Megatron to be like, all right, I'm on it. And then the big finale is awesome. Like Bumblebee taking out the Pillar, Sam killing Dylan because that's something he promises to do, and then Optimus, for good measure, just being like, you know what, I'm just gonna kill any loose ends. So he kills Megatron and Sentinel. In the book of the movie, he actually has a truce with Megatron, and Megatron walks away. But in the movie, I guess Michael Bay was like, no loose ends. We just want to wipe all that shit out right now. And then you get the scene that you get. I should mention, Starscream gets killed by Sam because of those bombs in his eyes. It might be a lame way for Starscream to go, but at the same time, Starscream is such a lackey to Megatron, and he's even more of a lackey to both Megatron and Sentinel Prime. It's like, yeah, of course that's how he went out. Like, that's the most loser-ass way to go. Gets his head blown off by Sam Witwicky. Hilarious. You gotta love that shit. All of this set to a great score by Steve Jablonsky once again, which at the time was my favorite Transformers score. I would say Last Night is now my favorite Transformers score. So yeah, at the end of the day, I love talking about Dark of the Moon. I think it's one of those movies that I just have a very special affinity for. I'm happy to, keep revisiting it as much as I can. I keep listening to the soundtrack. I just love talking about this. So guys, thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you guys had a great time with it. It was so much fun talking about all of these movies so far. One more to go, and then we get to Transformers 1. I can't wait to talk about those two. And if you like this, please just subscribe. Thank you very, very much once again for coming on this journey with me. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the movies.